Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Don't Mess Over a Union Man. My late husband was a Red Seal carpenter with the Carpenters Union of Canada. This story was his and it happened several years before he passed. My husband had this guy who he did not get along with, Willard, who also happened to be his union representative. The relationship between the two was, we'll say, troublesome. My husband was a do-it-by-the-book, don't cut corners, do it one time correctly kind of man. This guy always gave my husband trouble because he had slight seniority. Things like my husband's vacation would get bumped for Willard even though we had booked it 6 months in advance. Or my husband being ignored for a position within a company he worked for. My husband's paperwork just magically disappeared. With this guy being the union rep, there was honestly not much my husband could do. Willard was a real company man. Like make the company happy, the workers don't matter, cut corners, hire non-union laborers even though they were required to only hire union members, unless the union committee was unable to meet the required amount of union workers. See, on the team my husband was on, most of the members were made up of Willard's buddies and this really messed my husband over. Well, it came to the day that Willard was offered and accepted a position within a company he was contracted to, and he took it. My husband was made aware of this and he wished Willard farewell. My husband assumed he would be leaving as the union rep. Willard did not. The problem with that is it's super against all union contracts and agreements and a super no-no. My husband tried to get in touch with the higher-ups but was unable to. He was brushed off. There was a process to do it but you had to go through your union rep. You can see the problem. So my husband said duck it and decided to just bide his time. The quarterly union meeting was coming up in a few months. Well, not many of the workers went to the union meetings, but my husband put on his Sunday best and made sure to be there extra early. After all the union meetings were done and over with, the leader of the union opened up the floor to any questions. My husband was first in line and asked a single question that ruined Willard's career. So you were recently promoted to a position within the company they were contracted to. Who am I supposed to voice my concerns to now that you're now working directly for company XYZ? The man's face went white. He never even reported to the union that he was working for the company. The fallout was beautiful. Within a week Willard was ejected from the union, was fired from the job with the company he was contracted then hired with, and blacklisted from ever rejoining the Carpenters Union across Canada. He was also fined a fairly substantial amount of money. It turned out he was making it look like there was not enough unionized workers to do the jobs and subcontracting the positions to his friend's company. Last I heard, he moved to a small community in northern Ontario where he works on and off as a handyman. Next one is titled, Nephew's Bully Gets Attacked by Murder of Crows. This happened long enough ago and the bully, let's call him Tom, and his family have moved away that I feel safe telling this story. Background. My nephew, let's call him Ethan, went to elementary, primary school about 2 blocks away from me. Since both of his parents, my sister and my brother-in-law, worked, we had an arrangement that Ethan would come stay with me after he got out of school until his parents could come pick him up and take him home. Since I worked from home, I was able to help Ethan with homework, make snacks and play with him. It was a pretty cozy arrangement. Ethan and I are pretty close and we had lots of fun playing catch in the yard. He's now pitching baseball, getting my butt kicked in video games and even just relaxing with a good movie. Overall, life was pretty good. Except for one problem. That problem was named Tom, another kid who across the street from me and was in the same grade as Ethan. Beginning in maybe 4th grade, Tom decided that Ethan would make a good target and would bully him on the walk to my house. It wasn't unusual for Ethan to show up with bruises or tears in his eyes because of the various crap Tom pulled. Ethan never would fully tell us, out of fear, wanting to protect us, what the hell was going on. This became such a problem that Ethan's parents and I complained to the principal and even tried asking our local police department what we should do. Unfortunately, their advice response was all the same: ignore him, we can't do anything because there's no proof, not happening on school grounds, make friends with him, kids will be kids, etc. Since the attacks were happening during the walk to my house, I started showing up at Ethan's school to walk him to the nearby baseball field to practice pitching and batting. This worked for a couple of weeks and Tom was never a problem, probably because he saw the baseball bat I was carrying and I'd look at him with, "I will not be afraid to use this on you if you pick on Ethan," around me, glaring in my eyes. Unfortunately, this just led to the bullying happening at school, and it was even worse this time around because Ethan needed his auntie to help him. Once again, the school did nothing because they're about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. We even went to Tom's parents, begging them to knock some sense into their son. I won't go too much into that confrontation because we'll be here forever. But let's just say that home environment was probably a good reason for why Tom was picking on Ethan. During this time, Ethan was miserable. He was too afraid to go outside and play because Tom would be there to harass him, and he admitted to me later that while he loved me and was happy that I'd walk him home, he wanted to be a big boy and take care of his own problems. To say that Ethan's parents and I were at our wits' ends is an understatement. We wanted to help him more than anything, but with both Ethan being withdrawn and being out of resources, it was safe to say our hands were tied. That was until one evening in the middle of Ethan's summer vacation between 4th and 5th grade. I was watching the news when I came upon a special on corvids, ravens and crows. A research team did an experiment on wild crows, ravens to test their memory, and it turned out that these birds not only had a sharp memory but would attack anyone who did another crow harm. The best part? They never forget. Even after several weeks, months, they remembered the good, bad people. I knew we had a local murder, a flock of crows, nearby, and decided to put this little tidbit of knowledge to the test. The setup. With only 2 months to go until school started again, and Tom, his family away on vacation and summer camps, I didn't waste time. I bought a huge bag of bird seed, and at the times Ethan would walk home, I would walk the path and drop little handfuls of bird seed in full view of the crows, always remembering to take a different route to get to the school so that way the crows wouldn't get confused. It took maybe a week or so before I'd notice more crows arriving, and they eventually started leaving shiny things, bottle caps, buttons, discarded gum wrappers, etc., for me to find. Once I was sure I had the crows knowing I was the good guy, I brought Ethan into this. We'd walk the path and feed the crows. Soon enough, the crows would start coming out and we'd be friendly with them, giving them names and listening to them gossip while sharing news of our own. We must have looked really weird to the neighbors, but Ethan really enjoyed it and even looked up things about corvids on his own. He learned the shiny stuff the crows were leaving were a form of currency, thank you presents. Thinking this could be helpful, he started collecting other shiny things for the crows and would leave those in addition to the bird seed. With 2 weeks to go until school started up again, I began phasing myself out of the afternoon feeding times, so eventually it was Ethan who was feeding the crows, leaving gifts on the walk home. The day before school started, I gave Ethan a bag of bird seed in addition to his shiny things and winked at him. The revenge. Sure enough, at the same time Ethan would come home, I heard the crows cawing and what I thought was a little girl screaming. I stepped outside and saw Tom running towards his house, the crows dive-bombing him and pecking at him. Further down the path, Ethan was laughing so hard at the sight of his bully running and screaming like a little girl that he fell to the ground. Tom peeled into his house and locked the door as I walked over to Ethan and helped him up. Of course I had to get the juicy details, so I asked what happened. Ethan was walking home, spreading the birdseed and leaving the shiny things per usual. About halfway home, Tom pounced, making some nasty cracks I won't repeat here before punching Ethan. And that's when a crow dive-bombed Tom. When he tried hitting it away, more and more showed up until the whole murder, who was watching, were ganging up on Tom. I was smiling sweet tears of revenge at our little feathered friends, especially when I saw the whole murder crowded around Tom's house like it was a set from Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. The aftermath. Needless to say, Tom and his family did not have a pleasant experience the remainder of the school year. There was at least one crow in front of his house watching and waiting for him to come out so he could chase him around. And every afternoon, the murder was protecting Ethan on his walk home. Of course, Tom's parents tried to protect their kid by swinging baseball bats and other things to keep the crows away, but we quickly learned that crows talked to each other and soon the whole murder was on them too. They tried to take legal action against Ethan, his parents and me for training the crows to attack Tom, but that got thrown out the window really quick because they had no proof of us training the birds, as they had been gone all of summer break and none of the neighbors wanted to help them. Apparently the murder of crows weren't the only ones Tom's family pissed off. So for the rest of the year, Tom had to be driven to and from school so he and his family wouldn't get attacked. When summer started, they moved away, probably to be rid of the murder of crows. Ethan has moved on to middle school, but we still visit the murder and leave shiny things for them. Just in case. Next one is titled, "You Want to Use Our Netflix? No worries. I absolutely despise my in-laws. They're money-grabbing monsters. Long story short, they nearly made my wife, children and I homeless a few years ago because of their own greed and see no issues with it. Anyway, I come home after work and wife has had a rubbish day, so I order a takeaway and we settle for a night of binge watching TV. Then I see it my in-laws have profiles on our Netflix. I don't even mention it, but I'm fuming. Those thieving little idiots can't even cough up a few pound a month for Netflix. I talk to my friend about it, he laughs, I rage more. So I set their profiles and kids' profiles and they can't watch anything with a higher rating than you. I also set a password on our profile so they can't go into the settings to change. I'm loving it, swaggering around thinking I'm a champ, showing off my pettiness to the guys at work, telling everyone and anyone who'd listen. They've asked my wife about it, she changes it back and I give it the whole, my goodness, how on earth has that happened? Must be a system error or something. I change it back again. What a hero I am. I tell everyone a second time how I've effectively ruined their lives now that their viewing options are Paw Patrol and Noddy. Turns out they've been sending my wife the money for Netflix for some time now. I've since changed the viewing settings back to standard. Edit. To everyone asking why they nearly made us homeless, we were supposed to be moving into their second home while paying full rent etc., as it had been on the market for a while but it wasn't shifting. Less than 10 days before moving day they decided to sell. They weren't exactly strapped for cash as they were bragging they were in the process of selling a bit of land for £1 million to a developer. Luckily our landlord at the time was a decent guy and let us carry on where we were living. The universe obviously saw how upset I was, because the sale of both the second home and the land fell through. When they asked when we were expecting to move into their second home and start paying them rent, they got a big duck off from me. On the point that my wife should communicate better, such a petty comment, I love it. Next one is titled, "Neighbor Throws Food from Second Story Window." A few years ago I lived on the second floor of an apartment building that only had 4 units, 2 on the top floor and 2 on the bottom floor. My next door neighbor and I had both gotten puppies around the same time, and so we both started using the surrounding grassy area to take our dogs out. Every tenant had dogs, so everyone used the same grassy area. One day, I noticed a pile of cooked ramen noodles on the grass right next to the building and hardly stopped my curious puppy from eating what we had found. A few days later, the ramen was still there, but now there was a single dead rose and what looked like some bread as well. I looked up the side of the building and noticed a fresh rose sitting in a window on the second floor. The window lines up directly with the growing pile, and because our apartments mirror each other, I know that window was my neighbor's kitchen window. So now, I'm almost certain that the next door neighbor is just tossing food scraps out the kitchen window as if we live in a giant composting bin. At this point I'm annoyed because I didn't want to have to rush to the vet because my puppy ate a chicken bone or something from the growing food pile, but also, who the duck throws food out of the window like that? So I did the first thing that came to mind. I used the dog poop bags I had on me to scoop up a handful of noodles and then dropped the noodles, no bag, directly on my neighbor's doorstep. Never saw any more food out there. Next one is titled, "Revenge by Being Nice." I had an FWB, friends with benefits, who I used to consider a very close and personal friend. Sex aside, I always thought we genuinely enjoyed each other's company and would still be close friends even without the sex. Last week, he invited me to his place where we had sex, then we started to talk about deep, emotional, incredibly personal things. It was mostly on his end. He was also smoking a cigarette while talking. At the end of our conversation, he told me that he wants to bring me home, and that he wants to be alone at the moment. It was 2 in the morning. He used to tell me about this fantasy he had, where he would have sex with a woman he had no feelings for, to smoke a cigarette afterwards, and then to leave her so he can be deep and thoughtful or whatever. I feel like he used me for this disgusting, misogynistic, narcissistic fantasy of his, and it makes me feel like I've been lied to and betrayed. He used to tell me all the time about how I was one of the most important people in his life, but then I find out that it's all BS. After bringing me home, he doesn't text me for an entire week. I checked his social media a couple days ago, and I see that he went to a party with a bunch of his friends. He wants to be alone. Yeah, right. He texted me for the first time this week that he wants to meet up at a coffee shop tomorrow. I've been coming up with a revenge plan that is not this big grand scheme to ruin his life, but it's something I'm super proud of. This guy is a complete narcissist. He used to say all the time about how all the women he's been involved with in the past have been crazy, and that some of them have manipulated his life to make it worse, but that from that struggle, he's come out a better, stronger person. He loves being the life of the party, and he has story after story about crazy ex, or this one time, or some weird story that's happened to him, and that he doesn't have a normal life. This lets me know that I can't make an event. I can't give him another story about another crazy woman that he used to be involved with. His birthday was a couple weeks ago, and before he used me up and threw me out, I offered to make him a sex paddle. I'm a decent woodworker, and he is extremely into paddling. When I told him I was making a sex paddle for his birthday, he went on and on about how this will be the best birthday gift he will have ever received in his life. How the paddle will be one of the few things that he takes with him everywhere and something that he will keep and treasure for the rest of his life. My plan is to meet him for coffee and give him the paddle. I know. Crazy. But this is a handmade personalized paddle that took like a month to design and make. He himself talked about how much he will treasure this paddle, and how he'll keep it for the rest of his life. I'm hoping that every time he even looks at the paddle, he'll be reminded of how much of a selfish jackass he is. How terribly he treated his supposed friend, and because of the significance of the paddle, it's not something he can get rid of to clear his guilty conscience. He's also talked about in the past how he wants to try my mum's kimchi, so I'm giving some of that to him too. I know how he takes his coffee, so I'm considering going to the coffee shop a little early to buy him his coffee. I need him to know how nice and considerate I am. I need him to feel guilty for hurting me so badly. This isn't a big event that he can tell his friends. This is something I'm hoping will stick with him for the rest of his life, and will eat away at his conscience. I want him to confront himself about how much of an a-hole he is. All I did was try to be a good friend, and he made me cry all week long. I want to be so nice to this guy who is clearly so undeserving of it, that he feels nothing but guilt for as long as possible. There's no story coming out of this that he can tell people. This is just something that he's going to have to live with. Last one is titled, "Call Me Lazy Girl While You Skip Off to Drink, I'll Make You Suffer For It." So this happened a few years ago on a relatively large project. We were building a 4-level house from the ground up. At the time I was 23, working with my dad, the boss, and my stepmom's cousin, who as dubbed in a previous post is Max. Fake name. Max is an older gentleman in his 50s, who is, for a lack of a better word, gross. He is the type of person to knock something over that injures you and laughs and tells you to be careful next time. Needless to say, he doesn't think I, 23, female at the time, can do what he can. So he refers to me as girl. Now onto the main part of the story. We had just gotten joists and trusses for the top 2 levels and the roof. It is also 6 p.m., also known as universal quitting time for construction workers, unless you work for my dad. Max, who has been working with us long enough to know we don't quit until after we've cleaned up, has vanished. Dad looks around. Where's Max? I shrug. Go inside and get him. We live just down the street from this job. So I go and find Max sitting on the couch in his dirty, sweaty clothes and beer in his hand, half gone. Done already, lazy girl? This is a new one and I'm upset. Dad says we aren't done. He grumbles but downs the rest of his beer and follows me out. We get back and my dad is already moving some of the joists into place and orders me and Max to bring the rest. Sourly I do as asked and grab one. Max sticks around and makes comments about me under his breath. Come on, lazy girl. This one he says loud enough for everyone to hear as if I was a sled dog. I think, lovely. Dear readers, cue my petty revenge. I grab one end and do a shuffling walk, thinking at most I'll bang his knee. Painful, but no lasting harm. I hear that sound that I'm pretty sure every guy knows as a gasp, wheeze, pained cry. I turn around to look. Max is standing directly behind the joist, holding squarely in front of his junk, looking like he wants to vomit. I may have done it a couple more times. I was not called lazy girl again. Before anyone defends him and tells me I'm awful, let me tell you how he knows he is supposed to carry these on his side. Also, he never once changed positions over the dozen different ones we moved. He simply wanted me to carry more weight. Thanks for listening.